We're recording now, so you're good to go.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another live community classroom with Michaels. Today we have Marley from the Marley Bird with us, ready for another exciting class in the Great Caron Cake-Off. Today we'll be adding a double brim and pom-poms to the knit loop. And are we doing pom-poms, Marley? I'm sorry.
No, we're not doing pom-poms. We could do a pom-pom.
I
could do
was
a
like,
pom-pom
hang on a minute.
if you want. Like, I love pom-poms. We could talk about pom-poms. How about that?
Okay, so today we'll be adding a double brim to the knit butterfly loop hat as our icing on the cake. My name is Lillian from Yarnspirations, and I'll be helping with any questions you might have during today's class. Feel free to ask questions in the chat here, and we'll be sure that Marley answers them. While we're giving you some time to join the class, feel free to let us know where you're watching from. And just a reminder that today's class is being recorded. You can find the recording on michaels.com/classes, as Marley said.
Awesome. Cool. So that's Lillian, everybody. So she'll be the disembodied voice behind the curtain for us today. Everybody say hi, Lillian. Hi, Lillian. So happy to have many of you here from all around the world. As I mentioned, it's always delightful, especially when I get to see so many familiar faces here in the Zoom chat room. Really great. Okay, as Lillian mentioned, we are going to talk about this lovely pattern called the Knit Butterfly Loop Hat, which is interesting because it uses a technique that I actually learned from a Russian YouTube channel, and it didn't have a name of what the stitch was. And so I called it the dip stitch because you dip down below the knitting that is on your needles to grab yarn to pull it back up. And then Yarnspirations is calling it like this butterfly stitch. So it's kind of, it's interesting how the names of stitches can get changed over time, but it's just a fun, simple stitch pattern that we can talk about later on. But more importantly, this class is all about the icing on the cake. So let's talk about that first here for a second, because Michaels and Yarnspirations, as you know, have teamed up, and we have the Great Caron Cake-Off. And for the Great Caron Cake-Off, we have put together a series of classes where we've taken patterns using the Caron Cakes yarn that is exclusive to Michaels. So this here today is the Swirl cakes. And we're showing you how to maybe change up the pattern a little bit to make it fit your needs, kind of like the icing on the cake, as Lillian mentioned, whether it's adding a pom-pom to the top, which we absolutely could do, or taking a basic brim down here at the bottom and making it a double brim, to like double thickness if you want. So we're going to talk about several different ways you could do that. The convenient thing about that is when we learn about the brim, you can take that knowledge and apply it to all future knitting projects, okay? So that's not something that it's only for this hat, it's for all future projects also. But the Great Caron Cake-Off is all about the icing on the cake, but there's also a contest, you guys. So to celebrate 5 years of Caron yarn at Michaels, you have a chance to win a grand prize of 500 balls of Caron cakes. I mean, 500, like so much yarn. All you need to do is create something with your Caron cakes, take a picture of it, go to michaels.com/Caron Cakes contest and submit your photo for a chance to win. So there's one grand prize who wins 500, and there are 4 finalist prizes who will win 50 Caron cakes each. Still not a bad prize. So as you're watching today and you're like, you know what, that's kind of cool. Maybe I want to make that hat pattern or choose a different hat pattern. And newsflash, it does not have to be a Yarnspirations pattern. It could be your own creation. So all you budding designers out there, grab your hook, grab your needles, get started, and show us what you got. Go enter the contest, and you never know, you could win. All right. So I think my hat, this is the second to last class in the icing series. On Saturday, Sarah from Repeat Crafter Me is going to talk about a crochet hat. So all of my By Crafty people out there, if you want to learn more about the crochet hat, you can join Sarah on Saturday. All right, you guys ready to talk a little bit about knitting and the butterfly loop hat? Give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're all here. Awesome. Oh, I love it. I love the thumbs up. Okay, so the butterfly loop hat. This hat pattern, Lillian, correct me if I'm wrong. They have this, yes, I see it right there. Lillian has put the PDF to this pattern in the chat. So in the chat, you should be able to click it and be able to get this pattern, whether it's on Yarn, I don't know if that's on Yarnspirations or on Michaels, but you have access to this pattern if you want it. This pattern uses, let's go ahead and go to my hand cam if you guys are good there. So this is the hat we are actually going to make. And on the pattern, you can see here that it uses one ball of the strawberry swirl. So I actually have one ball of the strawberry swirl right here. So it's the Caron swirl cakes, and it has a really cool colorway to it. I'm gonna move my microphone a little bit closer. Hopefully you guys can hear me a little bit better there. And then right here, you'll see it says it uses a pair of size 9 or 5.5 millimeter knitting needles and US size 10.5 or 6.5 millimeter knitting needles. And these are circular knitting needles with a 16-inch long total length. And I know people have asked me this, so if you're a new knitter out there, that's 16-inch, you guys. That's from tip to tip. So it includes the size of your needle plus the cord and then back to the tip. Okay, so that's the 16 inches when they mention that. It also mentions that you need a set of size 4, 10.5 or 6.5 millimeter double pointed needles. And that's for the top of the hat as we start to reduce down the number of stitches. Now, if you're good at magic loop, you can always just finagle your circular needles into a magic loop and make that work. Totally up to you. You need stitch markers, a tapestry needle, and then of course those sizes of needles are all dependent on your gauge. This is basic information, we know this stuff. But what you might not understand, why are there 2 different needle sizes? So I know a lot of new knitters out there are like, what's going on? I don't understand. Well, on a lot of different patterns, designers like to make the smaller needles or like to have the smaller needles used when they're making a cuff of something. So whether it's a cuff or a brim of a hat or a cuff of like a mitten, they'll usually use smaller needles just to make those stitches a little bit more snug. So we would use the the 5.5 millimeter knitting needles for the brim. And then we would change to the larger circular ones or the 10.5, US size 10.5 or 6.5 millimeter for the body of the hat. You guys are all with me there, right? All right, so for this hat in particular, we would start with a circular or small circular needles, cast on 80 stitches, place a marker, join to work in the round. Now the thing here is the instructions don't tell us what type of cast on to use. So you can use any cast on you like to use, your preferred cast on. I love the long tail cast on when I'm making this or making just about anything, so I would probably use that. But if we know that we are going to turn this into a double brim, the first thing we have to think about is how do we want to start off our brim for when we need to join it, okay? Meaning, I'm gonna pull in another hat here. This hat here has a double brim. And when I started the hat, I did a long tail cast on. I made my brim double the length, and then I folded my cast on up, and then my first round actually joined the last row of my brim to my cast on edge. Now I did that with my long tail cast on. You can do it with a provisional cast on. You could do it with any other cast on you want, but you have to think about that, okay? You have to think about what is your goal? How are you going to join the brim together? Okay, so that's the first thing we have to think about. The second thing we have to think about is, for this one, you work this brim until it measures 2.5 inches or 6.5 centimeters. Do we want to keep that distance, or do we want to make it that distance, but when we fold up, obviously we get a smaller brim? Is that what we want? If we want to keep this distance, then when we make this brim, we have to not stop at 2.5 inches, we would stop at 5 inches, right? So that's doubled. Y'all with me so far? Give me a thumbs up. I'm just looking to make sure. Okay, good. So these are the things we have to think about. We have to think about our cast on and what our ultimate goal is going to be as far as joining the pieces together. And then when we're working our brim, are we going to keep it the same size, which ultimately makes it cut in half when we double it over? Or are we going to keep it this same size, which ultimately means we have to knit 2 of these, like it's going to be double the distance. Another thing we have to think about is, are we going to maintain this stitch pattern? Are we going to maintain the knit 1, purl 1 ribbing? Or are we going to change it to stockinette? Or are we going to change it to knit 2, purl 2? Or, you know, all those little things. Are we going to maintain this? And so we're going to go into that a little bit further in just a couple minutes. But these are the top things we have to think about. Okay, so I'm going to move this aside and I have two hats here, so I'm going to move them both. I've already cast on using the long tail cast on method and this yarn right here. And I cast on the 80 stitches like the pattern said, and I've only worked up maybe an inch or so. And so this would be where I'd have to continue working up for another inch, inch and a half if I wanted to keep it as is, or even further if I want to double it up. And when I say double it up, I want to show you what this means. If I were to keep it like this with my edge here, I'm essentially going to be folding my fabric in half. So that way, when it's time to knit this row, I'll be knitting one stitch from back here and one stitch from up here, very similar to a 3-needle bind off, and it will join the two pieces together, which will ultimately give me this nice sort of rolled edge here. Can you guys see that so far? Yes? Give me a thumbs up. Let me know. Perfect. Okay. So on this piece, I just cast on just like the pattern said, and I started working in my knit 1 purl 1 ribbing just like the pattern said. And even at this point, I don't have to change too much. Like I could get to my 2.5 inches and decide, you know what, I don't want it to be a double brim, and all is not lost, right? It's like, okay, fine, then I just jump into the pattern. Or I can get to 2.5 inches and say, you know what, I do want to do a double brim and I want to make it longer, and I just keep making it longer. And I just fold it up and pinch it and go. So let me see here. I have my swatches here. Is it this one? Where's my other swatch? I don't think I have it here. Where is it? You know what? I'm going to do this. We're going to talk about jumping around with what I want to do here. Because I feel like this isn't long enough. So I'm going to knit. I'm going to knit here for a second. You guys stick with me and let's talk. Let's see. Are there any questions so far? I'm going to knit just some here, if you guys are cool with that, so I can show you how this works. You guys know.
Sorry, we do have a question asking what color you're using today.
Oh, that's a very good question. And I don't have the ball band on my ball. So, Lillian, I'm going to ask you to see if you can look that up because I don't know.
Sure thing. Let me take a look.
Yeah. I have 3 different colors out here, and the only one that has the ball band on it is the strawberry swirl. So sorry. I'm not sure. I'm just playing around with this one. It's whatever one has like the teal. All right, so I think I saw one pop up said, do I have to use a double brim? No, not at all. You can absolutely make this hat just the way it is. We're just trying to say if you wanted to change something up, do an icing on the cake, this is what you could do. All right. Now, a lot of different designers that I've worked with through the years or been fans of, they like to do double brims using provisional cast on instead of just doing a long tail cast on and then pinching it up. I go back and forth with which way I prefer. The lazy part of me actually prefers to do the long tail cast on, and then as I fold up, you see how I have like that little loop right there that's free from my long tail cast on? That's actually what I end up working into when I join it to this stitch. So to me, I'm just like, well, it's still nice and flexible. I still get some good stretch, maybe not as much as I would get if I did a provisional cast on, because you do get some really good stretch when you do a provisional cast on. But like I said, the lazy part of me is the one that just goes right into the long tail cast on and then just jumps right in. Now, one thing, what is the long tail cast on? Betty says. Betty, that is it's a nice universal stretchy cast on that anybody can do. And let me get to the end of this round and see if I can pinch this up. Betty, I'm going to say, let me go back to that. And if we happen to run out of time, there are videos for the long tail cast on the Marley Bird YouTube channel that you can check out to learn more about it for sure. It's just another cast on that you can do for knitting. Let me get over here. Anybody else feel like when you're like rushed to knit, you're like, okay, I gotta go. Go, 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 go. All right. Lillian, any other questions popping up?
Let me take a look. Meanwhile, I have found out the color. So of Caron's Swirl cakes today, you're using the color Iced Cream.
Ice cream. There you go. I did see a question pop up about the Italian cast on. You could, but you really don't need it because where you're casting on is going to be hidden on the inside of the hat. So you wouldn't need to do that, honestly. Okay. So let's pretend this is as long as I wanted this to be. So what I did, I had the long tail cast on, I jumped into knit one, purl one, ribbing, and let's say I'm like, all right, that's it. That's all I want. I just want like a little nubbin of a piece for my brim, so it's only going to be that long. Let's just see what I can do. So did you see what I did there where I took the bottom and I literally just pinched it in half so that the bottom part of my brim is butting up right behind the stitches on my needle? Can everybody see that? Yes? All right. Okay. The thing you want to make sure here is you want to make sure that your stitches down here are lining up with your stitches here. If you get them off center, they're going to kind of come out diagonally, and you really don't want that to happen. But what's going to happen here, I'm going to put my needle right into the stitch that's on my needle, and I'm going to come back here and right into that open loop right there of that stitch. I'm just going to put my needle into that one, yarn over, draw through the one of the open loop, draw through the one on my needle, and off. Okay, and I'm just knitting this round. I'm not going to maintain my ribbing pattern. I'm just going to knit. So I'm going to go into this next stitch. I'm going to go into my open loop on the back here. Try not to split your yarn if you can. Yarn over, come through that loop on the back, come through the loop on the front, and off. I'm going to try and work through a couple of these. Now this yarn is a little bit roving-like as it starts to be worked with a little bit. It wants to come, I don't want to say unspun, it just becomes a little bit finicky and easy to split the yarn. So just be patient with yourself. And as you're working this round, this is very similar to a 3-needle bind off, you guys. As you're working this round and the stitches pop off, you'll start to see where the cuff is just folded over. Can you see that? On the back, this is what it looks like. See there? All right. How are we feeling about this one? Because I was going to talk about provisional cast on next. We're going to talk about that one. But this is the one that, to me, this is the this is the lazy double brim, because it's like, you know, I'm not really going to worry about the provisional cast on. I'm just going to pick up the stitches I cast on and work like my 3-needle bind off and just make it work. Okay. And it's really easy. Maybe lazy isn't the right word. It's like super easy to me just to pinch them over and get going. How we feel about that one, you guys? Pretty good? Yeah, cool. I see Joanne gave me a thumbs up. That feels good. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside. Ronnie is asking, where do you increase to make the 84? And that's based on the pattern. And that just is randomly throughout the piece. You would do like a knit front and back, and you just do it at random portions of whatever the pattern calls for. All right, so provisional cast on. Show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the provisional cast on? At least you've heard about it. Okay, so there's a few of you. So what I like to do with the provisional cast on is essentially I will crochet a chain around my knitting needle, and then I work in to those chains with my knitting, and I just knit my first row, and then I jump into my ribbing. Okay, when that's done, you go back down here to the provisional cast on, you rip out those stitches, and as you're doing that, you put the stitches that were worked into it back onto your needle. And then you fold it up just like what I showed you, do that 3-needle bind off type of thing. It's not a 3-needle bind off, but you guys get what I'm saying, right? So where you'll join the stitches just like so. So this is the ultimate where we're going to. I'm going to show how to do this provisional cast on first, okay? So I'm going to set that aside. Let me grab some yarn. And I decided that if I used a smooth yarn, this might be easier for you to see. So that's why I'm not using the swirl cakes as I show this to you, because I wanted you to be able to actually see what I'm doing. All right. So These are not the correct size needles or anything, but this is going to work. The first thing I like to do is I put a knot in my actual yarn to start. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell me that this was my beginning. If I could tie a knot, right? It's going to tell me that this is the starting side of my crochet chain, because I want to make sure I start on the opposite side when I start to unravel it. Otherwise, it's really hard. Then I go ahead and I just put a slip knot directly onto my crochet hook. All right, guys, if you're not a crocheter, this is still, you should be able to do this without any issues. I have my crochet hook in my right hand, my knitting needle in my left hand. All I'm going to do here, take my yarn, going underneath my knitting needle. I will take my crochet hook. You go underneath the yarn, so that's, you know, it's called a yarn over, and you just pull that through the loop on your hook. Then we reset. We bring our yarn underneath the needle again. Grab the yarn with our hook and pull it through the loop on the hook. You reset, yarn around, and pull that through. You guys with me here? And you will do this until you have the number of chains on your knitting needle that you need to cast on for your hat. You guys are asking me where I get my crochet hook. It's a Susan Bates crochet hook with a special handle made by an Etsy seller. It's called Touche Crochet. I actually have pain in my hand if I crochet too long, and I use regular crochet hooks without this nice big handle. So that's why I have it. All right, you guys seeing how this is working? If you are not familiar with crochet hooks, it might be a little finicky, but you can do this. All right. If you absolutely must use a knitting needle, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to put this in. I'm going to yarn over. I go underneath my needle here. Ugh, I could pull this through and pull that through. So much easier with the crochet hook, y'all. But if you absolutely can't, you can do this with a knitting needle. Does that help you guys at all, or does this confuse you even more? I'm gonna go back to my crochet hook because it's just easier. See that? All right, when you get all the stitches cast on, you need to do, I go ahead and I chain just a couple more. So that way, and I'm just chaining them not on the needle, I'm just chaining all the way down here. As far as what size hook or anything, you guys use about the same size hook you are using as the size needles you're using. When you get down there, here's a pro tip. I say this in every class. Put a big pom-pom on your scissors and you will never lose them, you guys. Once you get down there, cut it. Just pull that out and you're done, okay? So now, I essentially have a crochet chain on my knitting needle, okay? You guys with me? If you find that that's too difficult, just kind of a side note, those of you who can crochet a chain without any issues, let's just use this as an example. Say you crocheted this chain, what you could do is if you put the chain where the butt of this chain is showing you, it's like that one solitary like bump in the back, you can take a knitting needle and just go into the butt of that stitch and put it on to your knitting needle. Can you see that? You can go like that and put them on. This needle is too big for what I'm doing, but can you see, you put them on and then you could have that too, if doing the way I showed you is too difficult. But there's that, all right? All right, so here we go. We're here. This is the end that we started on. So this is our slip knot, our slip stitch, and this is the end we want to start on when we do our first row. Okay, so even though the hat pattern has us essentially cast on and then join in the round, you do not do that yet. You do your provisional cast on, so we cast on our chains, and then because you're using circulars, just scoot them down to the other side. I'm just going to turn this around. So here's my knot. I'm going to grab more yarn. If I have more yarn, let's see. Let's grab yellow. You'd think I'd have enough yarn around here without any issues, but everything's attached to knitting needles. So I'm having a little bit of a problem here. Sorry, give me a second. I'm grabbing it. Okay. So you grab the yarn you plan on using for your hat, and you will knit, not ribbing, just knit your first row, okay? So I'm just going to knit my first row. I'm still not in the round if I were working in the round. Once you get this, go ahead.
Sorry, is it okay if I jump in with a couple of questions?
Yeah, give me just 1 second, but yes.
Okay.
All right, so once you get all of those knit, this is where, so once you've got all the way around, this is where you would start to work in the round. So you would join to work in the round and just start your ribbing pattern, okay? So once you do that, then your ribbing pattern, as far as the distance, it's the double what your pattern would mention, okay? All right, you with me so far on that? Okay, Lillian, jump in, my friend.
Thank you. Dee asked, can we use this method of casting on as a permanent one rather than just a provisional one?
Technically, yes, if you weave in your tail of your chains and stuff, but it's meant to be a provisional cast on.
Okay, and Melba asks, would doubling the yarn have the same result for the brim?
Not necessarily. Doubling the yarn is going to make your stitches fatter. Doubling the brim makes the thickness of the thing fatter. So if you double your stitches, you're going to get a different gauge, where if you double the brim, like it just becomes thicker this way, not this way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Is that all? Those only ones? Am I doing that good? There are no more questions. Okay, so here I am. This is a provisional cast on. One end has my knot. There's my knotted end. So that means this end is the one that I finished with, okay? I did my knit stitches just like I said, and obviously I'm not in the round here because I was trying to save time and just kind of work back and forth so you can see what's going on. I've just worked up a certain distance here, and what I could do here is fold this in half, and then I'm going to join these two. But the first thing I want to do is take off this provisional cast on and put those on a needle, okay? So I'm going to grab a needle here. Where is the needle? Okay, so I'm going to grab the one that we used for this. I'm just going to pull this off. And so I'm essentially taking the brim that I knit here. I've turned it upside down. And the reason I've done that is so that way I can look at the stitches and put them on going this way. I don't want to start on the edge with my knot. Okay, that's why that knot is so important. So it lets you know the difference between the two. I want to start over here at this edge, and I'll begin by undoing my chain. So I just start to pull out my chain. This is where I feel like the chain should be done with the smooth yarn, especially even if you're going to go into this yarn, it just makes it easier. So you pull out, and when you get over here, this first one here, when we go to pull it out, we have to pull it. You see it's in there. Oh, it's starting to come undone. Can you see where the yarn is down there into that one? So I take my needle, I'm just going to put it into the right leg of that stitch as I pull it out. And then I don't want to lose that one that fell out before. There we go. I'm going to go into the right side here. Can you see how it's like a V? The stitches are like a V here. And so I want to go into the right leg of the V. And when I go into it, I then can take my yarn and just pull it out. So I come over here. There's my stitch, my V. I'm going to go into the right leg of the V and then pull out my gray. And I can go through this whole thing without pulling out the gray first. So like I could go into the right leg of the V. This is very similar to like if you were doing a lifeline. So the right leg of the V. Did I get into the right one? Here, let's do this. Just want to make sure. It's hard to see with the camera in my face, like in my way, you know what I mean? Okay, so can you see the V there? I'm gonna go in, pull that out. Go in, pull that out. In, pull that out. In, pull that out. In, pull that out. And then this last one here is always kind of a little goofy. So it might be when you pull those all out, you might have to count your stitches to make sure you have the right count. If you're one off, you can always create one more. It's totally up to you. But essentially you pull them all off. So now we have live stitches here that are ready to go. Okay. Again, I'm using circular needles. So I'm going to turn this back to where I have the, I'm going to say like the working yarn that I'm using is now on top for me. I'm going to put my needle in place. I'm going to take the stitches I just took off of my cast on, pull those up. I think I'm one short, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So I'm one short. So what I could do is I could cast on one extra. I'm not going to be too worried about it for a double brim. I'm just going to go through and it will just be fine. But can you see how I have one needle right there? Up there is behind the needle that's active. You'll also know the needle up there that I took the provisional cast on off and put those stitches on. It's a couple sizes smaller than the needle that's active, and it actually just makes things easier when you do that. So if you're ever like, oh my gosh, I don't have 2 size 9 needles. If you have like a size 7, use the size 7. It's a little bit easier. All right, so if I pull these close to the tip, I'm going to grab my active needle. So this is my larger needle. And just like before, I'm going to go into the stitch on the front, into the stitch on the back, and then knit through both of those stitches and off. Into the front, into the back, knit, and off. Into the front, into the back, knit, and off. Into the front, into the back, knit, and off. Front, back, knit, off. And I'm holding my yarn in my left hand, so those of you who are throwers, you can see that this can be done just the same way if you are continental or throwing. It's the same idea. And so for this, instead of just having those loops back there like I showed you at the beginning, and we were just picking up through the loops, we actually have a stitch back there. So this would be my one extra stitch, and I just knit it like normal. But now the needle that had all of my whoop, there goes everything. So the needle that had the provisional cast on is now empty. I get rid of that. Here's my needle that now has my double brim. And it's joined, and if I put it down here, you can see it has a lot more stretch than just the long tail cast on join. So if you are making a hat that you want to make sure it has a lot of stretch and it's not going to like cut off circulation of the head, this is a really great way. But again, it just takes a little bit more effort to do it. You with me? All right. So it's just like, it's just rolled over and you just start knitting with it. All right, so I'm gonna have you go back to my face real quick and I wanna see everybody. And hopefully, Hamina, maybe she's, hi, hello everybody. How are we feeling so far? I'm gonna go back to where I have gallery view. Barbara Dahl, does it look like something that you'd wanna do? Like it's not so difficult, right? Awesome. Yeah, it's really not a difficult thing. You can easily do it just with those 2 basic things, especially whether you just do your basic cast on and then fold it up and just find a loop in the back and join, or you take that extra step and do the provisional cast on, take your, those stitches off, put them on a needle and have it join. Now, one of the cool things about a double brim is that you can also do some decorative stitches as you're doing it. So I just showed you how to do it with just basic ribbing, right? We just fold it up and we have a nice ribbing that folds over. But one thing that you could do is at the point, about the midway point of your brim, where you're going to fold it, you could do a row of purl stitches, and that looks like it looks like you have this nice little decorative sort of edge where it's like your folding point. Okay, so I have worked up a swatch with that on some ribbing, but it really shows up the best if you're doing like stockinette. And then another decorative thing you could do is you can create a Picot edge on the piece. And so when you fold it, you actually get a really cool Picot edge. So I'll show you how to do that because it's a really easy thing to do. And then an even easier thing to do, you guys, is at the point where you're just after the halfway point of your fold, all you have to do is change colors. So that way or not past, like right before your midway point. So you cast on with the color you want on the inside. And then right before you get to the midway point, change colors to the color that you want on the outside if you want. And then when it folds, the inside of your brim will be a different color. Or you can change it right at the halfway point, and you could make an entire hat absolutely like doubled the whole way. Like that's a whole nother aspect of it all. Like for example, with the provisional cast on we just did, we could make the whole hat with that provisional cast on, go back, pick out the provisional cast on, and then with the live stitches that are then on the new needle, knit another hat the opposite direction, and then just tuck one hat inside the other, and you have a doubled hat. Pretty cool, right? Like, so there's a lot of uses for just that little information I just showed you so far. Everybody good? Everybody good? Yeah? Yeah? Awesome. I love it. I love the interaction here. This is fantastic. So what I thought I would do now is I've worked up just a basic little swatch. Again, this is ribbing, but I did put a row of pearls right there so I could show you what that looks like when you fold it. And then this will also give you another look of what it's like to work into just some basic cast on stitches. Okay, so I want to show you that. And then I have another swatch worked up here so I can show you how to do like a Picot setup so that we can work through that. And then if there's time, I'll show you the 2-color thing, but that should be pretty basic. You should know how to do that, but I have it just in case. Does all of that sound like a good plan so far? Kathy, sound like a good plan? Fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love the thumbs up. All right, let's go ahead and go back to my hands and hope that I have all of my yarn and needles ready to go here. All right, so I'm gonna go and start off right here with the gray. All right, so this is just some basic gray, again, smooth wash and weight yarns. I thought it was easier for you to see on camera. I did a long tail cast on. I did knit 1, purl 1, ribbing. Again, it's not in the round just because it's easier for me to show it to you like this, but you can absolutely do this in the round. When it's time for the midway point, when it was there, I just purled all the way across that row. And then I worked the other half back into the ribbing portion. So what I've done here is when I fold this edge up, you guys all see those little loops right there, right? That's what I'll end up working into. So as I fold this up, can you see those little purl bumps? How you kind of get that little decorative right there at that edge. It's not much, it's real subtle, but it's there, and it shows up a lot when the stockinette is done. I saw a question. Here we go. Okay, so I am going to jump right into knitting. I'm not going to maintain the rib pattern. So I go into the stitch. Again, right down here, I can go into the loop, yarn over, and draw through both. Can you guys see that? So as we do this all the way down the row, the the finished look just gives us a little bit of a different look at the bottom hem edge. And again, this can be done on the butterfly loop hat. It can be done on any other hat pattern that you want to make adjustments. It's no problem. Again, I just want to remind everybody, this is the one that I call the lazy one because I don't have to worry about picking out stitches. The biggest thing you have to worry about here is just making sure that you do have enough stretch once everything is joined so it doesn't pull in at your brim. Okay, get all the way down here. Did I skip a stitch along the way? Was I talking and totally skip a stitch? Because I feel like I'm running out of stitches. So maybe I just wasn't paying attention, y'all. And my bad, so sorry, it happens. Trying to talk and teach and do all this at the same time is a little bit tricky. Not for the faint of heart. Oh, maybe not, maybe I am good. All right, so I'm gonna get down here. So at this point, you then would carry on with your pattern. Let's take a look at the stretch factor here. So you can see I do have some good stretch, you know, like there's the back. You can see the back right like that. I have a good stretch to it, but more importantly, this is exactly what I showed you to start, but we have that little pearl kind of edge turning hem right there, okay? It shows up a little bit with the ribbing. It shows up a lot better when you're doing it in stockinette. So if you wanted to do it in stockinette, you could do that. All right, good so far? Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna show you a little Picot Edge. And this is one of those things that maybe you don't wanna do this on a hat, but maybe this is something you could do to a hem of a shirt or sleeves. Like I know I have a couple patterns out there that I've done this. I did a regular cast on and I've knitted up. I probably knit more than what I probably normally would do. But this is where I would then say, you know what, I'm gonna do a Picot here. And I could decide that, let's see, I wanna make sure I don't end with a yarn over. So I'm just gonna see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. All right, so I'm going to knit one here, and then I'm going to jump into my pattern. So I'm going to do a yarn over, and then I knit 2 together. Yarn over, 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 knit 2 together. Now, yarn over, knit 2 together. That's my repeat, right? The yarn over, knit 2 together, so I end with a knit 1. Okay, so that gives me that little sort of eyelets right there. So now I would continue on working in my stitch pattern to get this other half. So I'm just going to continue doing that, still in stockinette stitch. And while I'm doing that, Lillian, I'm going to have you let me know if there are any questions happening.
Yeah, we have a couple. A few people have asked if you're able to demonstrate the butterfly loop knit.
Okay.
We have 15 minutes, so
okay.
I'll leave it to you to see how you think about timing.
Okay.
We also had Jacqueline ask if you could demo how to join in the round.
Oh, okay. I can try to show that. I mean, it's literally you just start knitting. You just one edge to the other. I can try and do that too. Okay, so the butterfly stitch, so the hat, you guys, just so you know, I have filmed a video for it and it will be up on Yarnspiration's website, I think next week. So that will, or on their YouTube channel, so that will be available. I can absolutely do that. And it's also very similar to my double dip knit hat or double dip stitch on my YouTube channel. So there are instructions out there for that for sure. But I will see what I can do as far as timing and show things in here, make sure we have enough time to do that. Just going to knit along here. And if I can, if I can abbreviate little instructions here, I can try and get all of that in. Cool. Anything else? Anybody appreciate the fact that I have all these different types of needles here, like everywhere? I like have needles everywhere. I think I have a knot in my, I have a knot in my knitting. You guys know you're never supposed to knit a knot in your knitting. You guys know that, right? You always cut it out, and preferably you change the yarn at the beginning of the row. So I'm going to tink back. Here you go. Here's an extra, y'all. I'm going to tink. You just go into the stitch below the stitch on your right hand needle and you tink it back. I try not to ever change in the middle of a row. Okay. And then you just start knitting again. Ta-da, there's an extra instruction for you. I felt the knot as I was holding my yarn. I was like, no. And you just start knitting. All right. Hate it when that happens, but knots happen, y'all. It's a fact of life and it's the way things are made. So I don't let it ruin my day. I just move on. Cool. So I am loving the Michael's icing on the cake stuff here. I have learned so much from the different instructors that have gotten in here and popped in to show how to take one of these Yarn Inspirations patterns and add a little icing on top to just zhuzh it up a little bit so you don't have to always be a slave to a pattern, and you can take that knowledge to apply it to other things. Like specifically, I'm thinking about adding beads with Tamara. She did that one, and then she also did some slip stitches, I think, surface crochet stitches. Let's see here, what does it say? If you're knitting in the round and you find a knot, does it matter where you find the knot? So no, if I was knitting in the round, I would just change the yarn wherever it would be. But when I'm working just back and forth like this, I like to keep my color changes at the edge. It just makes it easier for me. How to put a new yarn on? You simply just start knitting with it. There's no other secret. You just start knitting with the new yarn. Let's see here. Cool. How do you do a knit one through the back loop? Well, I can show you that. Give me just a second. I'm going to get over here to the knit side. So through the knit side, this is your front loop. This is your back loop. So instead of going into the front of the loop, you would simply go into the back and knit. You just knit through the back leg. Make sense? Awesome. I'm trying really hard to show you guys both ways. You guys know that English and Continental, it's the same as far as holding the yarn. You're just holding your yarn different. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. English and Continental, it's the same motion of the knitting and wrapping your knitting needle. You just hold the yarn in a different hand, but it's the exact same motion. So whether I'm holding my yarn in my right hand like this or holding the yarn in my left hand, it does not matter. I'm still just basically knitting. All right, I'm gonna do one more and then I can show you this join. Any other questions so far?
We're looking good, but if anybody has any questions, please throw them into the chat.
Awesome.
I
I'm
think
trying
we've
to
covered
read
a lot of them, Ali.
as they pop up, so I hope so. Yeah, so I do have, just so you guys, I should have probably grabbed that hat. If we have time, I'll grab the other hat that I did with the dip stitch so you guys can see how similar it is to the butterfly stitch. I mean, it's like the same thing. You can see the instructions. Okay, so because I'm back here to the right side, it just makes it easier. I don't know if I have the same number of rows or not. We're going to pretend I do, okay? Let me make sure my cord. What I'm going to do, you can see I have those nice little eyelets down there and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, how is that going to become a picot? Look what happens when I fold at that eyelet point. Ta-da! Look how awesome that is. Can you see that? So now I have this really cool sort of Picot edge there poking out. And it's just like before, y'all. you just match up the stitches and knit. So go into this one. Here, I'll hold it over here. All these yarns poking out. Come over here, just trying to find the back stitch. Make sure you line them up. Go through the back, go through the front and off. In, make sure I go to the back, the front, and off. Back. All right, so let me see if I can do that. But you guys know how that works at this point, right? But look how cool that is. Okay, so if you change the pattern, if you're making a hat and it calls for ribbing and you're changing it to stockinette, you do have to keep in mind that the gauge will change, and so you might have to adjust some things. But this is a really cool thing to do, especially if you're doing like some sort of a delicate stitch on the edge or a hem on the edge of something, or maybe in a little girl's hat if you want to, or I don't know, it's just a fun, easy thing to do. And it's just with those knit two togethers and then a yarn over. Isn't that cool? So many of you are like, wow, that's really cool. That's awesome. I think that's just one of the most fun things ever to play around with. All right, so I'm assuming you guys understand the whole concept of 2 colors on knitting. So let me pull this in and let's see if I can, how much time do I have? I have like 8 minutes, y'all. Let me see. I might not be able to go through all of the instructions. Like, okay, so you guys know how to, I just showed you knit one through the back leg or the back loop. So I showed you how to do that. So on, let me pull this in. I'm doing an audible here, guys. This was not planning for this. Let's see here if I can make it through here. Oh, I joined that. All right, so I'm gonna ignore the fact that that's joined. We're gonna pretend we're not doing it. So let's pretend this is the start of our round. We would be purl 1, knit 1 through the back leg. So I'm gonna go ahead and get, let's see, the first one would be purl 1. So I would be purling 1.
Sorry to jump in, Marley.
That's all right.
Your hands are a little low off camera.
Oh, thank you.
That's
so
perfect.
Purl 1, that's all right. And then go into the back leg, knit 1, and then you'd purl 1, and so on and so forth. You would do that all the way around. And what that does, you guys, let me pull the hat in. It gives you those grooves. So if I separate the hat out, can you see that? This line that you can see right there of those, they look like twisted stitches. That's what you get when you knit one through the back leg all the way around when you're working in the round. You get a really pretty line of twisted stitches, which is great as it balances out these butterfly stitches with the purls on either side of them. Okay, so that's what you're getting there. You're setting up the stitches here. Okay. All right, you with me? Okay. So you would do that for 3 rounds. And then the 4th round, this is where the 4th round, it's purl 1, knit 1 through the back leg, purl 1, continuing down 3 rounds, draw up a loop in the center of the 2nd stitch on the left-hand needle and slip loop onto the right-hand needle. And then knit 3, draw up a loop into the same stitch, slip loop onto right-hand needle, repeat from round. So that's where you're doing the butterfly stitch, or what I call the dip stitch. So I'm going to try and show you how to do that on this, just because I have a little swatch here and it's not really that big though. So I hope this will work. Let me knit over a couple stitches. Doing my best, y'all, to show you what you want. Let me see here. I'm just going to knit over a couple stitches just so that we can talk about this, the butterfly loop. So let's read through the instructions and follow through at the same time. It says, counting down 3 rounds, draw up a loop in the center of the 2nd stitch on the left-hand needle, or the left-hand needle, and slip onto. So this is the 1st stitch, here's the 2nd stitch. We drop down 3 rounds. So if this is round 1, this is round 2, this is round 3, you literally can go into that stitch. Now here's the question. Do they mean 3 rounds counting the round that's on your needle, or do they mean 3 rounds after your needle? That's something that you have to decide. I think it's counting your needle. So we're gonna go 1, 2, 3, can you see how that's like big and open right there? Can you see that? I'm literally going to stick my needle right through the center of that stitch. Yarn over, pull out, and up. Okay, let me grab some, my yarn is stuck over here. All right, down the center, and then slip loop onto your right hand needle. So I slipped it onto the right hand needle, so I have it over there. Now it says knit 3. So I knit 1, 2, and 3. Now it says draw up a loop into that same stitch. So I'll go back into that same stitch here with my right hand needle. Now I like to hold those stitches, they don't go anywhere. I'm gonna go back into that same stitch, yarn over. Oh, this is so hard. I'm gonna show you how I typically would do it. Yarn over and then pull it back out and then make sure that's elongated. Okay, so that's that. I think I dropped a stitch there, hold on. I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna show you what I do. Let me put those back on. Let's do our knit 3 again. So we have our, that's our pulled up stitch. There's 1 stitch. There's our 2nd. Here's our 3rd. Instead of taking my right hand needle and going back into that stitch, I take my left hand needle, go into that stitch, yarn over, and pull up a loop. Then I put that loop back onto my right hand needle. It's so much easier for me to function that way. Can you see that? So let's knit over a couple and let's do that one more time. All right, so I'm gonna show you again. So this is where it says, following the 2nd stitch on the left hand needle, drop down 3 rounds. So 1, 2, 3, go right into that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and I'm gonna have that loop rest there on my right hand needle. Now I'm gonna knit 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3. Now I'm gonna go back into that same stitch that I pulled up a loop from and pull up another loop. You can do that with this right hand needle, but as you saw, I really have trouble with it. So I take my left hand needle and go in. Then if you go over top of your left hand needle and pull out and up, then place it on your right hand, you have a loop there. Okay? How's everybody like that? I'm gonna grab my other hat so you can see with some smooth yarn how it can work up. Can you guys see how that looks there? All right, so this is my double dip hat that I did that on. You can see I have way more butterflies, or what they're calling butterflies, than what the hat that we're looking at does. This one has them separated out a lot further than what mine does. Mine, I really stack them up right on top of each other, but it's the same idea. Every time that stitch drops down, it's always through the same point. So you have a stitch that goes that way, stitch that goes that way. Kind of looks like hearts, right? Looks like hearts. So the same idea was done here. They're just more separated apart. So as you're looking at this, what we just did were these elongated stitches right there, okay? So that gave us 2 extra stitches on that particular round. And on the next round, that's when you would knit 2 together through the back leg, and that actually would get rid of the extra stitch and get rid of the extra stitch, so you're back to your original stitch count. From that point on, it's just, you know, it's just basic knitting. Then you're just following the sequence all the way around. So you knit 2 together through the back leg. And I think this one's SSK. Is that right? I was gonna make sure. Yeah, SSK. And that's just to make things look uniform. And yeah, does that answer everybody's questions real quick? Just curious. Yeah, I'm looking at the questions right now.
It all looks pretty good in there.
Okay.
There was one question about your needles, but everyone else has
Which
said,
ones?
like, I think the square shaped ones that I know I've asked you about before as well.
Okay, so these ones here, these ones were collage. I don't even know if they are around anymore. These are Collage yarn square needles. I love them because they have a really sharp precision point, which I will tell you, As you're working these butterfly stitches or dip stitches, having a really pointy needle comes in handy. If they are too blunt, they're really difficult to go into, but you'll notice all of my needles really have sharp tips. I like sharp tipped needles apparently. I guess these ones these are blunt. So if you're wondering like what's the difference between blunt and sharp, you see like this one's blunt and the other ones are sharp, but this one is really sharp. Like it could puncture you. But yeah, those are some of my needles I've been using. But the butterfly stitch, or what I've called the double dip stitch, that's how you do it. It's really super easy. Not hard to do. Yeah, I love the way it looks with the swirl cakes because you have that nice halo on the swirl cakes and it makes it really cushy. It's a very kind of cushy sort of stitch. And you can see on this one with that knit through the back leg that they've created right here, it has a really nice line division between all of the butterfly sections. On mine, I didn't do that. I just kept my pearls in between and that's how that looks. So yeah, I mean, obviously you can see how you can really change up a stitch. Just while I have you guys here, you can see I did a pom-pom on this and I have instructions on the YouTube channel for sure, but I always add my pom-poms. I put a button on the inside and I make my yarn that joins the pom-poms really long and I thread it through the buttonholes and just tie it so it makes the pom-pom removable. And so you can do that with purchase buttons or purchase pom-poms. I know they have these on the Caron Cakes display at Michael's, but if you're going to make a pom-pom, you can do the same thing. I made a really big pom-pom here and you can see on the inside, I have a nice, really big button and I just tie it on with a bow and I can take that off. So if you're giving it as a gift, you can decide whether you want to, or they can decide if they want to keep the pom-pom or keep it off, and it makes it really great and reversible or washable too. But this one has a double brim. I did this purposely for this class right here, just to show you how a double brim. And this is my lazy one. This is the one where I did not do a provisional cast on. I simply just folded it up, and that's how that looked. Pretty cool. All right, so now we went over pom-poms. How about that? How to add a pom-pom. All right, so let's go back to my face. Did I catch everything you guys wanted? I really did try. I was watching you guys, looking at it all, and I will let you know if you want even more instructions on this. The video should be available next week on the Yarnspirations YouTube channel. It will be on my YouTube channel also, if you just want, just the hat. But now you know all the icing on the cake, how to really zhuzh up all of your other stuff. I have so many yarn and needles sitting here. It's crazy. But yeah, so I'm gonna look here. You guys are saying that you learned a lot. That's great. Oh, that makes me happy. You're welcome. I did not mind showing you that drop down. It's interesting because for crocheters, the idea of dropping down several rows to grab a stitch or something is no big deal. But for knitters, it's like, what does that mean? And it's really, it's just that easy. Just what I showed you. It's pretty easy stuff. You like the button idea. Awesome. And if you don't want to have a button, like if you're afraid it's going to tangle into your hair or something, you could always get like a foam disc and like a black foam disc or something and puncture holes in it and use that to just something to stabilize. It really makes it so that your pom-pom isn't too floppy either. It keeps it really nice and secure. So it's just a good thing to do. And as I mentioned, pro tip, add a pom-pom to your scissors. You don't lose them. It's fantastic. I've done it for years and I don't lose my scissors, which is great. All right, y'all. That feels good. I feel good. I feel like I like gave you all the information I could give you. Just before you leave, I do want to know, what was your favorite method? Was it the lazy way, the provisional, the purl bump, the picot? We didn't get to the two colors because I jumped to the butterfly stitch, but do you like the idea of having two colors of the cuff? Like, what was one of your favorite? The easy way, the lazy way, the provisional. Man, we're all over the place. Everybody likes a little bit different. You like that picot one, huh? It's snazzy. The picot makes me want to finish it, but that picot, it just is kind of a cool little edge there. It's just really neat. And you can do that to a lot of different things. Awesome. Awesome. I'm so happy. I'm so happy you guys joined me today. And don't forget to make something with your Caron cakes and make sure you enter that contest, michaels.com/Caron Cakes contest. And you have a chance to win a lot of yarn, This video is recorded, so you'll be able to check that out also. And I know that Lillian has a couple of parting things to tell you, so I'm going to head it over to her.
Thanks, Molly. Thanks everyone for joining us today for this live community classroom with Michaels. We would love to see your WIPs, so share your work with #MakeItWithMichaels and #Yarnspirations. And just a reminder, you can find more classes on michaels.com and the recording for today's class at michaels.com/classes, as Molly said. And don't forget to head on over to michaels.com/Caron Cakes contest to learn more about the great Caron Cake Off and enter to win.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Molly.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Valeria and Cynthia and Beth and Linda and Gloria and Anne and Joanne and Easy. And I mean, so many of you here. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll check you out again really soon. Bye, guys.